Hello class, this is Mrs. Ziegler. I'd like to introduce you to parts of a plot. The plot is an important component to any story, and we will discuss the details of plot in this presentation. What are the parts of a plot, you may ask? Well, there are 5 distinct sections of a plot: the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. All good stories capture us with the sequence of events that happen in a story. Authors don't do this willy-nilly or on accident. It's done on purpose, and it is done with a careful plan and with the intention of capturing our attention. Often, authors spend many of the words that they have to present to us devoted to the parts of the plot. They develop the characters and the events so that when you're reading it, it builds and builds and gets you more and more interested, and brings you to that big moment in the story that makes you want to get on the edge of your seat and forces you to pay very close attention and builds that suspense. The plot diagram, as stated before, is divided into 5 sections, and it kind of is a mountainous type structure. At least the mountain is the way it feels as you are reading a story. We've all read stories, and the excitement builds and builds and builds, and as you work your way up the mountain, or the excitement in the story, that is when the plot is being experienced. The beginning of the plot starts with the exposition. Then the rising action takes place. There is the climax at the highest point, and then the falling action and resolution. And every story has the same cadence as you progress through the story. Let's talk about the exposition. The exposition is where the author exposes all of that needed information so that the story can begin without confusion. I like to call it the backstory. It explains what happens that brought us to this point. We've all experienced conversations where you didn't get in at the beginning of the conversation, and so you're confused as you progress through that conversation. This is the way the author supports the reader, by giving us the required information that fills in all those holes and helps us to understand what's going to happen now. Characters are also introduced. It supports the reader with important character information and lets the reader believe the characters by getting to know them better. We learn about people and become friends with people by learning about them. What's their favorite color? What gets them excited? What is their personality? These are all character qualities that the author will introduce us to, so that we're able to buy into the character, believe the character, and make the character our friend. The setting is also described by the author, and it includes the when and the where. Where did the story take place, and at what time in history did it take place? The rising action is the building portion of the story, and this is where much of the action of a story is included. In fact, the majority of the book is devoted to the rising action of a story. The rising action develops the conflict or the problem in the story. In fact, everything that happens in the story during the rising action complicates the problem or outlines the problem further. Everything that happens is important to complicating the rising action, the conflict in the story. The climax is the big moment. And much like climbing a mountain, when you reach the climax of a mountain, you can see everything. Everything becomes clear to you. This is the turning point in the story. When the problem is solved, the characters are changed as a result of the struggle. At the top of a mountain, you can see far out, and everything it all makes sense to you. It's usually the most exciting or captivating part of the story. It's where you're at the edge of your seat and you're biting your nails and you're very excited, and the author is enjoying the fact that this is where they have brought their audience. The falling action is after the climax. It brings the story to a close and nears the end, but it's not the end. In fact, the major theme or lesson is quite often outlined during the falling action. And it's packaged up by the author usually during this time. It kind of collects all of the major ideas and puts it together in the theme, or the moral of the story is typically found in the following action. The resolution. This is where the author ties up loose ends. They resolve all of the problems. It answers unanswered questions, and it ends the story. Sometimes it ends the story with new questions. Sometimes it ends it with a bang. Sometimes you get tears and you need a tissue. And other times it's set up for a sequel. But how does the plot help readers? Well, the plot is very important to readers in that it helps the reader deepen their comprehension of a story. And we know that comprehension is how we understand a story, the thinking that we do in understanding a story. It allows a reader to kind of anticipate what's going to happen next and know that, I've finished up the background, the exposition, and so now I know that I'm into the rising action of the story. So now I need to keep my eyes peeled for the problem in the story. So it also helps the reader to see the progression of the story and how events connect to one another, or relate to other events or choices in a story. We know that a story progresses in a certain way, and if we can keep our eyes on that progression, we'll be able to see how events and choices affect others. It also helps the reader to identify and consider the building blocks of a story. Knowing how an author creates their story, the structure that they use, helps us in our own understanding of other stories and of our own writing. What I'd like you to do is watch The Brave Monkey Pirate by Robert Hayes, or Hayes Roberts, and pay close attention to the parts of a plot that you can observe. And then at the end of this presentation, you will be able to see how those parts of a plot are outlined.